The newest installment in the Scream franchise is finally out, and this is my spoiler-filled review of Scream 7. Let's do it. Thank you for joining me today for my review of Scream 7. And if you enjoyed today's video, I really hope that you subscribe to the channel and like this video. It really helps the channel grow. Also, follow Popcorn Heist on Instagram, where we have reels and trivia on Tuesdays and polls on Saturday. So let's get right to it. This is my spoiler-filled review of Scream 7. I actually have a spoiler-free review that I've linked here and in the description as well. If you have not seen Scream 7 and you do not want it spoiled for yourself, turn back now. I'm really excited to review it. Scream is one of my favorite horror franchises. It's really one of my favorite franchises in general. I also want to hear what you have to say about Scream 7, so comment down below, where does Scream 7 fall in your Scream franchise ranking? At Popcorn Heist, we choose a quote for every video, and the quote of today's video is, "That would be a ridiculous retcon at this point in the franchise," which is said by Mindy about the return or potential return of Stu Macher. Just to give a quick disclaimer, I'm not actually 100% sure that that is the exact quote because the movie just released tonight and I couldn't get the exact quote, but I tried my best. I definitely agree with Mindy that the return of Stu Macher would have been a ridiculous retcon at this point in the franchise, so I am glad that the movie did not go there. But it was nice to see Matthew Lillard return for the Scream franchise. He was a great Ghostface in Scream 1, and having him return was a great way to bring nostalgia to the franchise and bring back a beloved character that hasn't really been touched on since Scream 1, but I'm glad that they decided not to undo his death. I usually hate a retcon death. It usually doesn't work very well, so I'm glad the movie didn't go that route, and it allowed the movie to more easily connect to the issues of the present day with AI. Although Matthew Lillard as Stu, I would call good nostalgia bait, there are other points in this movie where there's a lot of nostalgia bait, and we're almost referencing the nostalgia bait from prior movies. For example, we're in Stu Macher's house in the first scene, and that was already redone. And then you also have the scene of Sidney's daughter bringing her boyfriend through the window to sneak into their house. And it's kind of a moment to relate Sidney's daughter to Sidney's younger self. But they've already done that in Scream 4 as well with Sidney's cousin. So there was a few moments like that where I was like, okay, we're referencing the earlier movies, but we've already done that reference in Scream movies. So the movie's almost running out of references at times where it has to reference a reference. But the biggest nostalgia bait is Neve Campbell returning to the movie as Sidney Prescott. I'm definitely glad to see her back. Sidney is a great leading woman. She was in Scream 5 a little bit, but she was not the leading woman, and then she was not in Scream 6 at all, although she was referenced. And I almost feel like the movie spends a little bit more time referencing the fact that she wasn't in Scream 6 and kind of explaining that, rather than explaining why the main characters in Melissa Barrera's character and Jenny Ortega's character from the last two films were not in this one. Because of a lot of the controversy around the actresses not being in this film, I feel like the film was scared to address it at all and scared to touch on those characters, because the main two characters from the last two movies who we've established as a new generation has not returned for this movie, and we're returning to our original lead. This movie has a tough time establishing where it fits in the Scream franchise, and I feel like that's so important to each Scream movie. It's a sequel or the end of a trilogy or the next generation or a Scream make, and this movie doesn't really explain where it sits. And I think they had an opportunity to just be like, we don't know what we're doing with the franchise, so we're bringing the original lead back, which a lot of franchises do, so they could have kind of leaned into that, and I feel like they missed their opportunity to do that. And as an extension of that, I think many of the things that make Scream Scream were missing or not fully fleshed out in this movie, because this movie doesn't know where it sits in the larger Scream franchise. The rules aren't fully fleshed out, because they're focused on Stu Macher on FaceTime. They're not as focused on making the phone calls themselves iconic, only the FaceTime sequences. And because it sits so oddly between all the different Scream generations, it has a tough time juggling everything. Sidney and Gail are back as our leads, and they're great in the movie. We also have Mindy and Chad come back in, and I love how they were included in the movie. I love the explanation for why they're there. But because we're focused so much on all those legacy characters, the movie has a tough time in establishing the new generation. We're on like our fourth generation of characters in the Scream franchise, so it's a little bit hard to get invested in them, especially when their time is sacrificed to serve some of the older characters. You really don't care too much about the main squad, the high school squad that's really pivotal in many of the Scream movies. I almost feel like because of that, they could have just sacrificed the whole high school thing in this movie and focused a little bit more on the legacy characters, because they really didn't do a great job juggling it all. Part of the reason I had a tough time connecting with the new generation is because honestly, I didn't like Sidney's daughter all that much. I liked their dynamic. I liked Sidney's role as a mother and how she didn't want her daughter to have to go through the same things that she went through. But I really just didn't love the character of Sidney's daughter. They almost went a little bit too far with making her weak, to the point where at times she's really dumb, and it's just hard to see Sidney in her. Also, where the heck are the other kids? Sidney has, I think, 3 kids, and they kind of really quickly explain away where they are, but throughout the movie, I was wondering if they were gonna give a little bit more explanation on them. Maybe they're saving that for a future Scream movie. Because the movie is balancing so many characters, you sometimes feel like you get a little bit of whiplash trying to track where everyone is. I think you especially feel that with the Ghostface character. I think part of the fun of every Scream movie is trying to figure out who's in what scene, to try to figure out who Ghostface is. But because they have a different structure to the reveal of Ghostface and they wanted to do something a little bit different, which I can respect, I feel like it makes it hard to track where Ghostface is, how many Ghostfaces there are, and that makes the mystery of who Ghostface is a little bit less fun to figure out. That being said, Ghostface was real mean in this movie. I thought the kills were super gory, super inventive, and I think that was a real strength of the movie. So kudos to Scream 7 Ghostface for making the kills even better. I did love the commentary on AI. Scream has always done a great job of staying relevant to what's going on in society in the present day, and I think using AI was a great way to go. I also loved the scene where Sidney is seeing multiple different ghost faces on the screen. We were missing one of my favorite ghost faces from Scream 4, who I would have loved to have seen, but I guess they couldn't afford the actress. And although those callbacks to prior Scream movies was a great way for Sidney to enter into the very final sequence, I do think the reveal of Ghostface is a bit weak. With the neighbor, it's a little bit predictable, and with the guy from the psych ward, it kind of comes out of left field. So you kind of have a combo of both where you're not surprised with one and you are surprised with the other. And I feel like because you don't spend too much time with the characters who are revealed to be Ghostface, and they're not really that relevant throughout the whole movie, it makes the Ghostfaces feel a little bit less iconic. I also feel like Ghostface's motivation in this movie is very half-baked, and Ghostface killed her own son, and they don't really give a great reason why. The woman was inspired by Sidney, but also wants to kill her to create a new Sidney in her daughter. It doesn't quite fit together, and that's like one of the most important parts of the Scream movie. Who is Ghostface? How is their reveal? And what are their motivations? Also, making Ghostface sparkly in the movie was an interesting choice. I feel like Gail was missing in the final sequence. I guess they wanted to focus on the core family, but Gail is usually in the thick of battle in the final sequence, and I definitely missed her. Although I did love her and Sidney's relationship and dynamic throughout the film. You could tell these two characters have really been through a lot together and have built such a trust for one another. And I love their interview sequence as well, because it is something that has been mentioned multiple times, especially in the early Scream movies. And I love that Gail held to who Gail is and still asked Sidney the hard questions. I love that scene at the end where Sidney tells Gail that she is a friend that she can trust, especially after all they've been through throughout all of the Scream movies. I also love that Gail didn't come into this movie with haters like she usually does. Her and Sidney started the movie as close friends who have been through a lot and ended the movie the same way. I would give this movie a 3 out of 5 popcorn buckets. It had some of the best and most brutal kills in the entire Scream franchise. I also enjoyed my time with the legacy characters, but because it can't find its place and find its footing within the larger Scream franchise, it falls short on many of the things that make a Scream movie a Scream movie. Thank you for joining me for this review, and if you enjoyed this video, I hope you join me for future reviews and more Scream content. I'm actually working on a ranking of all the Scream movies, including Scream 7, that I'm planning to release next week, so definitely keep an eye out for that.